My boyfriend, Alexander, he once got stabbed while protecting me and even kissed my prosthetic leg in front of the media reporters. Before he met me, Alexander was a reckless guy who feared nothing in the world. After meeting me, he began to cherish his life and gave up all the extreme sports he used to love. Everyone knew that he valued me more than his own life. However, Alexander had only one flaw. He was a confirmed non-marriage advocate. Later, I found out that he had proposed to his ex-girlfriend on the summit of Mount Everest. He wasn't against marriage in general, he just didn't want to marry me. A video of Alexander and me went viral on the trending list of social media again. The reason was quite simple. Alexander hadn't participated in car racing for a long time, but this time, because of a casual comment from me, he took part in a major championship race and proudly won the first place. In the video, he was wearing a black and white racing suit and was bending over to get out of the racing car. When he took off his helmet, his long and well-defined fingers came into view. On the pulp of his ring finger, there was a tattoo of a word, which was my name, Emily. A sports reporter handed him a microphone and asked about his thoughts on winning the championship. He just looked at the camera, his eyes burning through the screen, with a lazy smile on his face. Emily, this trophy is for you. Screams erupted at the scene. It was almost a blatant display of his favoritism. 3 years ago, Alexander was into activities like rock climbing, bungee jumping, and car racing, always seeking thrills. 3 years later, he started to value his life so much that he even gave up his favorite car racing. And this time he participated in the race just to present the trophy to me. Once this video came out, netizens were deeply touched by this kind of love, and they called me the girl who tamed the devil. Did anyone notice the tattoo of Emily's name on Alexander's ring finger? If this isn't considered marriage, then what is? The return of the racing devil, winning the championship just for love. I believe in love again. As an onlooker, I want to ask, have Alexander and Emily gotten married today? There was even a trending topic urging Alexander and me to get married. I pressed my lips together, hesitating. Should I tell them the truth? Alexander and I wouldn't get married, even though he had kissed my painted prosthetic leg and even though he had held up the trophy for me in front of the whole world. Because Alexander was a non-marriage advocate. After the race, Alexander held a celebration party at a villa. He and his friends were downstairs, with the lights on and filled with laughter and noise. I stayed upstairs to get away from the hustle and bustle. When I opened my social media account, my message list was full. That night was truly a feast for the netizens who were shipping us. At Emily, someone saw Alexander go to a jewelry store after the race. He must have been buying a ring. Looking forward to the proposal. Actually, I was just a small social media blogger before, but because of my relationship with Alexander, I had a large number of couple fans all over the internet. Everyone was optimistic about our relationship because Alexander's love was so obvious and generous. But I knew the real reason very well. I was a disabled person whose left leg was amputated below the knee, and I had to rely on a prosthetic leg to live. I didn't have a prominent family background, and I was just considered pretty at best. Alexander's love seemed even more precious because of this. The first time he painted on my prosthetic leg, he was on his knees. His hands were covered in paint, but he didn't mind getting dirty. He was such a noble and laid-back young master, yet he naturally gave a gentle kiss on my prosthetic leg. At that time, I looked down at him and joked, "It's like a proposal." He paused for a moment, looked up, and said, "Emily, I love you, but I won't propose, and I won't get married." Alexander was perfect in every other way. He loved me. Not wanting to get married was his only flaw. I could understand his choice. But facing the expectations and blessings of the netizens, I still felt a sense of guilt. In the end, I carefully posted a tweet, telling everyone that Alexander was a non-marriage advocate. Everyone had their own beliefs and choices. That was normal. I didn't know how much time had passed, but my phone kept ringing non-stop. I thought it was because of the tweet I just posted, and I was about to respond to everyone about Alexander being a non-marriage advocate. But when I opened my phone, most of the messages were from different people, yet they all sent me the same video link. I never expected the reversal to come so quickly. It was like a slap in the face. It was a proposal video taken from a friend's perspective. The pixels were a bit blurry, and I didn't know how many years ago it was taken. It was shot at a high place on Mount Everest, and the altitude of 4,500 meters was clearly marked on the boundary marker. The snow was swirling in the air. Alexander was on one knee. The girl in front of him had a red face from the cold and was smiling happily. The cheers and jeers of the friends around them filled the air. His hand holding the ring was trembling slightly as he called the girl's name over and over again. "Marry me. Lily, I won't marry anyone else but you. Lily, marry me." I had also thought many times about what it would be like if Alexander proposed to me. Given his flamboyant personality, I thought it would be a grand and luxurious proposal, maybe even a so-called proposal of the century. But it wasn't like that. He just brought the girl he loved the most to the top of the mountain and completed the proposal under the witness of his close friends, passers-by, and the falling snow. The video kept looping, and the number of likes was increasing rapidly every second. I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. Perhaps at that moment, I clearly realized that Alexander wasn't against marriage. He just didn't want to marry me. He had been lying to me all along. Alexander was downstairs. I walked down the stairs. Only then did I realize that the party downstairs had already ended. I stood at the corner of the stairs and could just see that the atmosphere in the hall was tense. Champagne was spilled all over the floor, and the place was in a mess. Alexander was leaning back on the sofa, staring at his phone for a while. His voice was very low, and there was no smile on his face. "Which one of you uploaded the video online?" Suddenly, he got angry and threw his phone against the wall, smashing it into pieces. Alexander turned his head and said word by word, "Didn't I tell you not to touch anything related to Lily?" Lily. These two words were the scar deeply engraved in his heart. No one else was allowed to touch it. Everyone present was as quiet as a mouse, and no one dared to speak. The hall was silent, except for the sound of my footsteps as I went downstairs. Alexander had his back to me and didn't turn around, but in an instant, his back stiffened. I slowly walked up to him and placed my phone in his trembling palm. Out of the corner of my eye, I accidentally glanced at the tattoo on his ring finger. The sound from the video on the phone was loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. It was a sentence from Alexander when he was 20 years old. "Lily, I won't marry anyone else but you." I looked down at Alexander. He lowered his eyes, gritted his teeth, but couldn't say a word. I said softly, "So, this is what your being a non-marriage advocate means. You won't marry anyone except Lily." Alexander was a man who kept his promises. I had always known that. I was shaking all over. "Since you can't forget her, why did you fall in love with me?" Then, there was an abrupt sneer from the side. I remembered him. His name was Michael, one of Alexander's closest friends. Alexander's friends would call me sister-in-law, jokingly, but Michael was always indifferent and seemed to have a slight aversion to me. "Why did he fall in love with you?" Michael repeated my question sarcastically, looking at me with a hint of mockery. "If it weren't for the fact that you have the same injury as Lily on your left leg, do you think Alexander would have taken a fancy to you? Do you think you deserve to be standing here? Do you deserve to be called sister-in-law?" Before he could finish his words, Alexander grabbed his collar and punched him in the jaw. It was as if he wanted to stop him from saying anything more. With this punch, there was almost blood. But Michael didn't fight back. He just said something, gently but sharply. "Alexander, if Lily knew that you're projecting your feelings for her onto some random disabled woman, she would be heartbroken." Alexander's actions stopped immediately. The people around them finally reacted and rushed forward to stop the fight. In the midst of the chaos, Alexander looked up at me. I felt as if a vice had clamped around my throat. The sense of humiliation instantly overwhelmed me, and I couldn't say a word. In fact, I had always had such doubts. Why did Alexander like me? I was long past the age of believing in fairy tales. I knew I was a good person, but I also knew that I was just an ordinary person. Yet he appeared in front of me like a prince. Because it was too idealistic, it seemed unreal. For a while, my comment section was full of questions from netizens. "Emily, did you save Alexander's life?" Everyone was joking, but we all knew the underlying meaning. We didn't match each other. I had never mentioned this to Alexander, and I always thought he didn't know. But one day, Alexander specially opened a social media account and started a live broadcast to respond to the netizens' questions. He talked about how he met me, how he fell in love with me, and how he pursued me. He put away all his casualness and smiled like a young man just experiencing his first love. Looking at the camera, his eyes were serious. "Yes, Emily saved my life. If it weren't for her, I would still be seeking death in extreme sports. I might have fallen off a cliff during rock climbing at some moment, or I might have died in a car crash during an off-road race. I'm really grateful for her tenderness and her resilience, which make me not seek excitement and worship death." I just remember that one day, after I finished a race, I was sitting by the roadside drinking beer and aimlessly thinking about whether the next thing I should do was skydiving or paragliding. Then I saw her playing skateboarding. She fell many times but got up again. The painting on her prosthetic leg was very beautiful and vivid. I don't know why, but my heart started pounding. She suddenly walked towards me and asked me worriedly if I needed help. It was like a ray of light shining in. Alexander was such a good actor, and the words he said were so beautiful. He had deceived all of us. We all thought that he could see the sincerity of my soul through my physical disability. In fact, he was just reminded of another girl who had the same unfortunate experience as me. Love for one extends to everything associated with her, even everything like her. That's all. Even though Alexander had already taken action to remove the proposal video on the snowy mountain from the internet, Lily's name had already come into the public eye. It wasn't difficult to find out who she was, because she was a famous figure skater. She had once shown briefly in the national sports world and was hailed as the figure skater most likely to win a gold medal at the Olympics. Even I had watched her competitions. Unlike me, who lost my left leg in an earthquake since I was a child, she was so healthy and full of vitality. Until now, there were still a large number of video compilations of her competitions on YouTube. The way she was on the ice was as passionate as fire. A viral interview from her early days resurfaced, cementing her status as everyone's first love archetype. In the video, she had just finished training, with sweat on her forehead, but her smile was bright. Of course I have to work hard. I'm going to win a gold medal. It's not hard at all. I'm working hard for my own dream and everyone's expectations. And my boyfriend promised that when I win an award, he will propose to me, when I'm the happiest. You don't know how hard it was to chase him. It's not easy to get his promise. In 5 years, if nothing unexpected happens, I should be married to him. If I dare to dream bigger, I should also be an Olympic champion. Alexander, get ready to be the man of the figure skating queen. But it didn't happen. A week later, she had a car accident. She refused to have her leg amputated and kept delaying until the muscles became necrotic and she had to have it removed. Later, she committed suicide. In fact, if I had been more careful, I could have noticed that Alexander was always absent on a certain fixed date every year because he went to pay his respects to someone. Alexander had always been very concerned about my emotional state, even though I was always optimistic. Because his former lover had died of depression, Alexander and his friends had always avoided talking about someone in their memories. I turned off my phone and climbed up Moonlit Hill outside the city by myself. At that time, I was volunteering there but trapped there by a heavy snowstorm. The snow blocked the mountain, and there was no signal. Alexander appeared in front of me with a rescue team. I thought I was used to being alone, but I didn't expect to be moved. Before we left, I told Alexander that the moon trees here were very spiritual, and the wishes we made might be heard by the moon goddess. He smiled and curled his lips. He didn't have any religious beliefs, but he wrote a wish card with me and hung it up. At that time, I looked at his long eyelashes when he lowered his eyes, and he was unusually serious. Blushing, I secretly wrote on the card, I wish I had met Alexander 5 years earlier. I didn't want to spend so many years, so many dark and helpless moments, all alone. I didn't ask him what he wrote, but now that I climbed up Moonlit Hill, I could already guess. On the familiar branches of the moon tree, the red wish cards that Alexander and I wrote were hanging side by side, with long tails. When the wind blew, they gently collided with each other. I saw what he wrote. Baby, I should have told you 5 years ago. It doesn't matter if you don't win a gold medal, and it doesn't matter if you can't skate. Your being alive is more important than anything else. The words were written so deeply that they almost went into the card. His despair and regret were so intense yet silent. I could actually feel his despair and regret in an instant. If I had looked back at his wish card at that time, I would have known this was a complete hoax. But I didn't. Not even once. When I was going down the mountain, I turned on my phone. Messages flooded in all at once. The screen showed Alexander's incoming call. During the time when my phone was turned off, the number of missed calls from him was incredibly large. This time, I answered the phone. Alexander's voice was a bit hoarse. Hello, Emily. His tone was stiff. There was nothing more ironic than this. Everything I had was fake. The wind on the mountain was blowing through the phone and reaching him. Alexander immediately increased the volume of his voice. Are you on the mountain? I could hear the sound of him standing up abruptly in the background. Which mountain are you on? I'm coming to find you right away. Baby, don't move. I'm coming to find you. This kind of flustered look was rare on Alexander. He was the kind of person who wouldn't be afraid even in the last second before his racing car flew off a cliff on a mountain road. But I didn't feel any warmth at all. Alexander had never called me, baby, before. That was what he called Lily. I had just seen it on that wish card. I calmly reminded him, Alexander, I'm not Lily. I won't commit suicide. I didn't know which word pressed the pause button, but Alexander suddenly fell silent. I gripped the phone tightly and could only hear 2 words. He said, I'm sorry. Alexander had said many sweet words to me, but I guessed that only this sentence was true. The wind on the hill blew through my hair, and I could hardly straighten up. I felt so nauseous that I wanted to vomit. I said, Alexander, let's break up. You thought you'd been handed a blessing, but it was a Trojan horse all along. Everyone knew that Alexander once had a white moonlight who passed away early. She was a former figure skater and his childhood sweetheart. Later, she unfortunately had a car accident and finally died of depression. It wasn't difficult to find the connection between us. I was just a substitute, nothing more. Alexander was using me to make up for his regret about Lily. Especially Michael, one of Alexander's friends in the circle, deliberately posted a tweet with a picture of Lily on the ice rink back then. In the photo, her round and slender legs extended in a beautiful arc in the air, and she was incredibly beautiful. Michael's tweet was sarcastic. Our Lily is the queen of the ice. We don't need imitations. It was obvious who the imitation referred to. The ones who were most hurt were the netizens who had blessed our relationship. They left thousands of angry comments scolding Alexander. Isn't Emily miserable too? Are we and Emily just part of your game? Alexander, did you really never love Emily? Actually, I'm not that surprised, because Emily is just a disabled person after all. How could someone as outstanding as Alexander fall in love with her unless there was some special reason? Was she really that stupid and never doubted whether she was worthy of someone as good as Alexander? Emily was just a disabled person after all. It's hard to describe what kind of mood this is. It's like when I was a child and encountered an earthquake, and all my relatives were buried underground. The feeling I had when I was in the ruins, looking around. Over the past 10-odd years, the path I've walked alone has been much more arduous than that of others. I've gone through treatments, studied, worked as a social media blogger, and been trying very hard to live on. However, there's a voice saying, Emily, you don't deserve happiness, because you're a disabled person. I've never forgotten the original intention of becoming a social media blogger. In fact, it was just because I wanted to share with everyone my life as a disabled person who lost her left leg. A prosthetic leg can also be very beautiful, and our lives are no different from those of ordinary people. My experience is meaningful to those who have the same misfortune as me. Many people have sent me private messages, telling me that I've given them the courage to face the stares of others calmly. They can go out on the street with their painted prosthetic legs and face the strange looks from others. But I never expected it to be like this now. Because of Alexander, the insults and arguments have never stopped. Even my physical disability has become a point that is frequently mentioned and discriminated against. I had to close all my social media apps and try my best to immerse myself in real life. I'm still taking part-time design courses at the Academy of Fine Arts. I'm striving to become a prosthetic leg appearance designer. I also want to bring a little help to many people like me. There are endless manuscripts to draw and drafts to revise. I still have things that I must do. Alexander isn't the whole of my life. I'm not familiar with my classmates in the Academy of Fine Arts. But it doesn't matter. Just after class, the people in the classroom started to walk out. It was raining outside the window, and the raindrops were hitting the window noisily. I was thinking about the theme of an upcoming art exhibition that the Academy of Fine Arts would hold. I still had no clue so far. Suddenly, a classmate next door nudged me with her elbow. She was just a female classmate I recognized by sight, but I couldn't remember her name. Emily, how's your work design going? I shook my head and put my book into my bag. Haven't started yet. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Alexander must have given you a large sum of breakup money, right? I paused and looked into her eyes. There's no breakup money. She sneered. How could that be? You've been together for 3 years. He even used his connections to get you into the Academy of Fine Arts. How could he be reluctant to give you money? I wish I were also lame. Maybe I could be a substitute who doesn't have to do anything either. People around stopped and looked at our argument. Maybe they also didn't believe that I got in here by my own strength. Discrimination was everywhere. They thought I would be angry. Suddenly, I stood up, picked up a book beside me, and threw it at her. She instinctively dodged, and the book landed heavily on the desk beside her. I looked at her pale face and said expressionlessly, maybe you don't know, but I also have a mental illness. If you offend me again, I'm not sure what I'll do. I really hate talking to people who are stupid and vicious. So, stay away from me. The whole class fell silent. See you at the art exhibition. The girl's lips trembled, and she couldn't say a word. I packed my things and turned to leave. Suddenly, I understood the reason for their silence. Because I saw Alexander standing at the door. His face was cold, and his lips were pursed tightly like a knife, as if he were the one who had heard those sarcastic words. I was very calm. I carried my bag and walked past him. These words all started because of him. Alexander should indeed feel guilty about this. It was raining outside. I walked in the rain with an umbrella. But then there were urgent footsteps chasing after me. Alexander grabbed my wrist. The scalding temperature was transmitted, but then he stopped. His voice was hoarse. Emily, I didn't agree to the breakup. I lowered my eyes and could still see my name on Alexander's ring finger. I just didn't know if it was really my name or another part of his story with Lily. But, breaking up doesn't need your consent. I patiently added. Alexander didn't have an umbrella. The rain was running down his face. He lowered his eyes, as if he didn't want me to see the tears in his eyes. Every word he said was difficult. The top lawyers and public relations experts are already involved. In just half a month, the public opinion will return to normal. I'll take care of everything related to the school and the disputes. Emily, I've never treated you as a substitute. To me, you've always been Emily, someone special. The only thing I did wrong was not telling you about Lily. We all didn't want to mention Lily's matter, and we were also afraid that you would think too much. My not wanting to get married is also true. She committed suicide the day after we went to the snowy mountain for the proposal. She was still wearing the veil. I've had a stress-induced fear of marriage ever since. His throat choked, and he almost pleaded, Emily, I love you. We can't break up. But the moment he met my gaze, he froze. He wasn't unfamiliar with such a gaze. When he first started pursuing me, because of my childhood experiences, I had a strong sense of guard against others and wasn't an easy person to be moved. I always looked at him like a stranger, polite but distant. Later, by chance, Alexander took a knife for me from a robber. His lips turned pale from the pain, but he still stroked my head and said it was okay. I fell in love with him from that moment on. I looked at him quietly. I went to Moonlit Hill. I saw the red card on the moon tree. You said, baby, it doesn't matter if you don't skate. I wrote beside it that I wished I could meet Alexander earlier. Do you know what I was thinking? I'd rather you hadn't taken that knife for me. It turns out that there really is a cause and effect relationship in the world. You also stabbed me, right in the heart, bleeding profusely. I've never doubted your feelings for me, because I have the courage to face hardships. I still believe in beauty. I believe that you like me because I'm worthy. But do you know? I started to doubt myself, wondering if I'm really good for nothing. Alexander's face turned pale, and he was soaked all over. He was in so much pain that he had to bend over in the rain. He remembered how shy and expectant my smile was under the moon tree that day. But he had let me down. The art exhibition was approaching, but I was stuck on the theme and made no progress. Until I received a phone call. Miss Emily, I accidentally came across your video. Could you please do a favor for my little sister? Could you design an appearance for her prosthetic leg? There are countless sufferings in the world. They always suddenly fall upon someone's world. I received a file about his sister. Eva, female, 21 years old, a model. If everything went smoothly, she would have the qualification to walk the runway in Paris next year. But her congenital disease flared up, and her calf atrophied, so she had to have it amputated. For a young model, what did this mean? The person who called me was her brother. He said, Eva is very beautiful. I hope her prosthetic leg can also be the most beautiful. Can you help us? He tried his best to keep his voice steady, but there was still a choke in his voice. I said, I could. This was what I wanted to do. I knew it. Eva was much thinner than in the photos, almost emaciated. Leaning against the hospital bed, she stared blankly out the window. It was already autumn. On the tree she was looking at, there were only a few yellow leaves left on the treetop, and no one knew when they would fall completely. Emily, I know you. She turned around and said, I've always been your fan on social media. I've watched the daily life you shared. I've always thought you were very brave. My brother is worried that I'll commit suicide like that figure skater. Actually, I've thought about it. Every night when I can't sleep because of the pain, I watch your old videos. If you can get through it, why can't I? But I can never be a model again. There were tears in her eyes. Even if she could get through it, her soaring dream had already died at the age of 21. I didn't say anything. I just handed the draft I had in my hand to Eva to look at. These were just the first drafts. In just a few days, I had gone through all her runway shows and magazine photos, and finally, I roughly sketched a few drafts. Eva's gaze stayed on the first page for a long time. Suddenly, big tears fell from her eyes. The page of the prosthetic leg draft she was looking at now had a silver mirror surface at the knee, entwined with a transparent sunflower totem. The inspiration came from her first runway show after being signed by the talent agency. What was most talked about in that show was the large number of sunflower elements used. She was the well-deserved rising star in that show. I said, Eva, it's not necessarily so. No one had ever stipulated that disabled models were not allowed to appear on the runway. No one had ever said that you couldn't have a happy life again. As long as you have the courage to take that step, everything will get better. In the following days, I buried myself in making and perfecting the work model. As soon as the finished product came out, Eva took a photo of it and posted it on her social media. Eva's social media account, the blogger I've always liked, made a beautiful appearance for my prosthetic leg. Hi, everyone, I'm back. This work will also be shown at the art exhibition of the Academy of Fine Arts in a week. Please come and support me. At Emily, she hadn't updated her social media for a long time. Since she got sick, the company terminated her contract. All business activities were suspended. Everyone knew that she had her leg amputated due to illness and was very worried about her. They were all afraid that she couldn't bear such a big blow. But now, she was back. Eva hadn't fully adapted to the prosthetic leg yet. Even though she was just wearing it for a photo, she still felt uncomfortable. But she smiled happily. Even though she was much thinner than before, she still had a strong fashion expression ability. The photos were incredibly beautiful. The comments section was filled with people crying. Eva, welcome back. This prosthetic leg is so beautifully made. I can't imagine how amazing it will look when she walks the runway. I don't know why I'm crying. You girls are really so brave. This post once topped the trending list. There were countless reposts and likes, and even many official media outlets commented and praised it. What happened next was something neither Eva nor I had expected. I received an interview invitation from a top newspaper, which wanted to dig into my past experiences, why I chose to do such a meaningful design job, and use it to inspire more people. Eva received an invitation to shoot the cover of a magazine's September issue. She would be the first model wearing a prosthetic leg to appear on the cover of that magazine. In a sense, this opportunity was a restart for both of our lives. No one mentioned Alexander and Michael at all. When they were mentioned, it was all a flood of curses. A scumbag and a sycophant, picking on a little girl. It's really boring. Although Michael had never said it, it wasn't hard to tell that he liked Lily. Lily did nothing wrong, and neither did Emily. The ones at fault are these idiots. They still look down on Emily. If you were her, you'd probably have cried your eyes out already. Making fun of our independent and strong woman Emily. Do you even deserve it? Michael was so angry that he argued with netizens for several days. As a result, he was beaten up by someone on the street, and no one knew who it was. He was so ashamed that he didn't dare to update his status now. On the day of the art exhibition, all the tickets had been snapped up long ago. When I arrived at the scene, I saw Michael being blocked outside by the volunteers maintaining order. He, a young master, had never suffered such an insult. He was so angry that he laughed and waved the ticket in his hand and asked, "I have a ticket. Why can't I go in?" The volunteer replied seriously, "We can't let people who might harm the works enter the exhibition. Who knows if you'll get angry and destroy Miss Emily's work out of spite." Michael was still wearing sunglasses. It was rumored that there was a circle of bruises around his eyes, which were caused by a passerby's punch. He sneered, "Emily, does she even deserve it?" I was about to pretend not to see him and just walk past as if I didn't notice him. But then I heard this sentence. It was a contemptuous attitude, and I wasn't unfamiliar with it. Especially on the day of Alexander's celebration party at the villa. Michael had also said something with the same attitude. He said, "If Lily knew that you're projecting your feelings for her onto some random disabled woman, she would be heartbroken." Some random disabled woman, that's how he referred to me. I turned around, walked up to him in a few steps, and slapped him across the face. Michael was stunned by my slap, and his face quickly darkened. It was incredibly gloomy. I just stood in front of him and said calmly, "Do you know why Lily committed suicide? It wasn't just because her career as a figure skater ended. It was also because of the discrimination that was everywhere. People like you have never truly respected us. To some extent, you're responsible for her death." Michael's face turned pale, and even his fingers were trembling. At this moment, he finally realized his guilt. People like him were the real perpetrators from start to finish. The belated guilt and responsibility almost choked him. I had already turned around and walked away, but he was still standing there. Suddenly, he called out my name and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry. If only Lily could have met you earlier instead of an idiot like me." The art exhibition was a great success. The prosthetic leg I named Sunflower became a popular spot for people to take photos. Even my classmates, who I wasn't very familiar with before, all voted for my work as the best work in their minds. When I was introducing the concept of the work, everyone listened attentively. From time to time, someone would ask a question. Because the exhibition hall could only accommodate a limited number of people, and there were so many people who wanted to see it, the organizer also launched an online live broadcast mode. After the exhibition ended, I was busy signing autographs for people. A girl in her teens was holding her mother's hand and looking at me timidly. She was very interested in the prosthetic leg I was wearing and kept looking at me. I took the initiative to walk up to her. The girl looked at me quietly but didn't say a word. She gestured a sentence with sign language. I often volunteered at a school for children with disabilities and could understand simple sign language. "Sister, will people like us be happy in the future? People like us who have been abandoned by life and faced with misfortune and discrimination, will we be happy in the future?" I reached out and touched her hair and nodded firmly. "Yes, we will. Because you're a very good child. Because we're all trying very hard to live our lives." In the vast crowd, I suddenly looked up and saw Alexander at the very back. He was leaning against the wall, surrounded by darkness. I heard that he had started crazy car racing again recently. Sometimes I would receive his missed calls in the middle of the night, but I didn't care. Indifference was my greatest tolerance for him. Alexander always thought he had a chance to win me back. Until this moment, when he saw the crowd around me, seeing me smiling and encouraging the mute child, he finally understood in an instant. The girl who used to walk up to him worriedly in the afternoon sunlight and ask him if he needed help would never come back. Whether he drank himself to death, raced his car wildly, or really died on a racetrack, she wouldn't be moved in the slightest. Alexander covered his eyes with his hand, and tears flowed through the tattoo on his finger. But my gaze had already passed him and looked out the window behind him. The sky outside was blue. Time was vast, and I still had things to look forward to and work hard for. Alexander was just a fleeting memory. My future was waiting for me.